crisis closer home now. Colombo is facing a tumultuous crisis. The President and Prime Minister are at loggerheads. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe may lose a vote of confidence next week, and Sri Lanka may see a total collapse of its current ruling coalition government sooner than expected. The question we are asking is, irrespective of who stays in power or who takes over the reins anew, how are relations with the big neighbour India likely to pan out? Senior foreign editor Padma Rao examines that question.
Dear viewers outside Sri Lanka, straight up, it's complicated. In 2015, Sri Lanka's oldest and largest rival political parties, the Sri Lanka Freedom Party (SLFP) and the United National Party (UNP), formed a so-called national unity government. The UNP's Ranil Wickremesinghe became the Prime Minister and the SLFP's Maithripala Sirisena became the country's president. They were dragon slayers, for they had defeated Sri Lanka's strongman, previous President Mahinda Rajapaksa, the man widely credited as being the first head of state to bring a 30-year-long bloody civil war to an end. The SLFP split, with a substantial chunk crossing over with Mr. Rajapaksa to the opposition. Still, it was a personal victory for Mr. Sirisena, for he had defeated and succeeded his former boss, Mr. Rajapaksa, who's today in the opposition but is still one of the oldest members of the SLFP. Colombo is in unprecedented crisis today. The Prime Minister stands accused in a huge financial scandal involving central bank bonds. There is massive external debt. There is debilitating international pressure to fulfill promises of war crime inquiries. Law and order has deteriorated. Communal riots rocked Sri Lanka recently, and the government of national unity is all but united. At the centre of that crumbling cookie is a fierce face-off between the President, Mr. Sirisena, and the Prime Minister, Mr. Wickremesinghe. To make matters worse for the ruling government, Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa formed SLPP, Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, a new party. He swept the all-important local council polls held recently, and all the Rajapaksas, be it the former president or his brothers Basil and Gotabaya or his son Namal, are certain to sweep the next national elections due in 2020. A no-confidence motion has been introduced now by the joint opposition against PM Wickremesinghe. And given that the bulk of his own coalition partner, the SLFP, has sworn to oust him, it seems very likely that Mr. Wickremesinghe may lose office next week. But what lies in store for Sri Lanka? Will the opposition be able to enforce snap parliamentary polls? And if so, how will relations with India pan out, whichever constellation comes to power? There was great hope placed in the Sirisena-Wickremesinghe combine in New Delhi. India's relations with the earlier Rajapaksa regime had been friendly but frosty. Sri Lanka had drawn closer to China and Pakistan during the final years of the war. Under pressure from Tamil Nadu partners, New Delhi had kept up the frost and the icy shoulder as far as the Rajapaksas were concerned. But the new dispensation brought even nastier surprises. Steeped in overseas debt, mostly to China, the current government leased away a strategically crucial port and even 15,000 acres of adjacent land on a 99-year-long lease to China. Chinese investment has Lanka firmly in its grips, while Chinese strategists have the island nation firmly on their radar as a key turnpike of their maritime Silk Route. Whether brought forward or not, opinion polls show that the Rajapaksas are slated for a victory at the next national polls whenever they're held. Mr. Mahinda himself cannot be president again since he has served 2 terms, but he can be prime minister, and his brother, the former defence secretary Gotabaya, is widely being considered the next head of state. Of course, it's too early to predict how relations with India will be, but there have been several interesting changes. Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa and his son and political heir Namal have indicated to WION in exclusive interviews that they are keen to improve ties with New Delhi. Though India still stands accused of interfering in the polls in 2015 that brought Mr. Mahinda's government down, there seems to be no ill will. But things are not all hunky-dory between the Rajapaksas and India either. At a seminar in Sri Lanka earlier this week, former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa referred to the contentious Chinese debt trap, and India also found a mention. Mr. Gotabaya said, and I quote, "The government of Mr. Sirisena has invited a power struggle between India and China by handing over national assets. It leased out the Hambantota port to China after creating a bogus debt trap. And when India became nervous, it offered them the Mattala airport, unquote. This was in the Daily Mirror in Sri Lanka. All this may be true, but Mr. Gotabaya also gave away a whiff of his own intentions at the same seminar. Any upcoming government or leader, he said, and it could well be a reference to himself, will have to address the issue and overcome it. Padma Rao, WION.